There's this ridiculous rule that exists in my family where if my older sister Magda isn't dating anyone, then I can't either. Well, it sucks. But I decided I was going on a date anyway. I planned it perfectly. My sister was holed up in her room, and my dad was working late. I wore one of my mom's old slinky dresses and used her perfume. If she were still alive, she'd let me date. I know that for sure. Anyway, I looked good and I knew Jeremy would think so too. We met online and he had been dying to go on a real date with me for months. And our first date went so well. We kissed in the back row of the movies. Then he said he had a surprise for me. At the end of the date, he took me to an abandoned building that had an amazing view. As we looked out at the view, he leaned in to kiss me. And then the next moment, I felt my phone vibrating. It was my dad. Oh no! But it gets worse. I picked up because he kept calling, and when he asked where I was, I told him I was studying at my friend Casey's. Then he said, "Oh, really? Since when does Casey live on a rooftop? And since when is Casey a boy with his hands all over you?" I froze, and then I ducked down. Oh my gosh, was my dad following us? "Eleanor, you get home right now before I come over there and show that boy a piece of my mind. Next time you choose to disobey me, don't choose a building opposite my office." Then he hung up. I peered over the edge, and sure enough, there was my dad, standing in the middle of his office, staring at me with his arms crossed. I was in deep trouble. Not only was I not allowed to date again, I was also grounded, pretty much for life. Why did my life have to suck this much? My dad reminded me of his stupid rule, and I glared at Magda. I asked her why she couldn't be normal and get a boyfriend for once. But she just laughed and said all boys were jerks and then slammed her door. I missed Jeremy so much. He didn't even go to the same school as me, so it's not like I could even see him there. But eventually, I hatched a plan. I had no idea if it would work, but it was worth a try. I created a fake account on Instagram and then sent my sister a message. I didn't expect her to reply, so I was totally shocked when she did. And for like an hour, we talked back and forth, and she even sent me a selfie, and she was wearing lipstick. I had to try hard not to laugh, and I went to knock on her door, and she shouted at me that she was busy. Yep, busy texting this fake guy, aka me, I thought to myself. Ha! For a few days I played along, pretending I was this mysterious, gorgeous guy. But then, of course, my sister asked if they could meet up. What now? I started to panic. I told her I was busy, but she kept asking. It honestly made me feel kind of sorry for her. Was she that desperate? So I called Jeremy and asked for a favor. I begged Jeremy to pretend to be this guy I'd made up and go meet my sister for a date. He wasn't up for it at all. But I said it would mean we could see each other again. All he had to do was go out on a date with her. And then surely my dad would let me go out on dates again too. Surefire plan, right? The night of her date, I got a knock on my door. It was my sister asking if she could borrow a pair of heels. I almost spat my drink everywhere. My sister in heels? I gave her a smirk and said, "Who is he? Come on, spill." But she just threw a pillow at me and said it was none of my business. I couldn't wait to hear how the date went, and Jeremy had promised to text me all through the date. But he didn't. So when I finally heard the front door, I called him. I was kinda angry, but he said not to worry, that it all went well, and Magda was interested in a second date. That wasn't part of the plan, though. At breakfast the next morning, my sister looked all loved up. It made me feel a bit sick, actually. Dad could tell straight away that she'd met someone. And when she asked him if she could go on a second date, I quickly piped in and said, now I could date too. But then the worst news ever. My dad said I could only date if it was a double date with Magda. How the heck would we do that? I called Jeremy and told him this stupid dilemma, and he said his mate Brad would come along to be my date. This was so unfair. What had I done? But I guess it was better than nothing. It was so awkward. The four of us were in this restaurant, and Jeremy sat next to my sister, and she kept reaching out and touching his face. I'd never seen her like this before. But then Jeremy was playing footsie with me under the table and kept winking at me whenever Magda wasn't looking. After 30 minutes of watching Magda flirt with him nonstop, I couldn't take it. I went to the bathroom, and when I came back out, Jeremy was standing there saying, "Sorry, babe." I accused him of flirting with my sister, and he was like, "Babe, I'm a good actor. What can I say?" But I wasn't happy. Jeremy was my boyfriend. We came back from the bathroom together, and my sister looked angry and reached out and planted a huge kiss on Jeremy's cheek. Yuck. Then when we got home that night, she started shouting at me, accusing me of flirting with her lover. She said he was coming over the next day to watch movies and that I should keep out of their way and leave her boyfriend alone. I couldn't believe it. Since when did she think that he was her boyfriend? I told Jeremy he had to break up with her, or I'd tell her what was going on, and he'd never see me again. He promised to do it the next day. After like 30 minutes of them watching a movie, my sister was zonked out on the couch, and Jeremy tiptoed over towards me. Then we went up to my room and spent some time hanging out. He said he'd break up with her when she woke up, but then we heard the front door. My dad was home. Oh no! Jeremy climbed out of my window and ran across the backyard to the gate, and I ran into the bathroom pretending I'd been taking a bath. That's when I saw it. In the trash can was a pregnancy test. What on earth? I scooped it out and dropped it in shock when I realized it was positive. Was my sister pregnant? But how? Suddenly all kinds of thoughts were running through my mind. Was the baby Jeremy's? I have no idea why I did what I did next, but I'll probably regret it for a long time. I took a pic of the test and sent it to Jeremy. I waited with bated breath for him to reply, but he didn't. I'd lost him, and it was all my fault. Part of me was praying that my sister was pregnant with someone else's baby. But later that night, my biggest fears came true. I heard her on the phone, and she was telling Jeremy because I heard her saying his fake name, Joe, the name I'd come up with. I didn't know what to do. On the one hand, it was all my fault because I'd come up with this ridiculous idea. But on the other, it was all Jeremy's fault. He was only supposed to act, not actually fall in love with my sister. I suddenly felt so angry. I could hear my dad pottering around in the kitchen, so I stormed down there and showed him the test. Then I told him Magda was knocked up and that it was my boyfriend Jeremy who did it. My dad looked like he was about to faint. And then Magda walked in and started screaming at me, saying I was jealous. And I had always been. And why couldn't I just let her have this one thing? So I told her everything. That I'd made Joe up. That he didn't actually exist. That Jeremy had pretended to be Joe. She looked like she wanted to puke. And then she was crying and saying she had to get rid of the baby. And my dad looked at me and said I was cruel. And that there must be something seriously wrong with me to play a trick like this. I felt so ashamed of myself. All of this because I wanted to have a boyfriend. Not only had I lost my boyfriend, I'd lost any chance of my sister ever wanting to speak to me again. I ran up to my room, packed a bag, and snuck out. No one even noticed because my dad was so busy lecturing my sister. I didn't know where I was going to go, but I knew I had to get out of there. I couldn't live with what I'd done. My sister was pregnant with a baby that came from a web of deceit and lies. I was a monster. I wandered the streets for a bit, and I wanted to go back home, but I knew I wouldn't be welcome there. I even thought about going to Jeremy's, but he was as much to blame for this as I was. In the end, I went to a shelter for teens, and they said I could stay for free and return for some work. So that's how I wound up helping out in a foster and adoption home for babies that the shelter also owned. And I loved it. Before I knew it, a few years had passed. And there was this one baby that I'd watched grow up into a 2-year-old. It made me think about Magda and whether or not I had a niece or nephew running around out there. So I tried to track them down. They'd moved, and I'd sold my phone back when I was first homeless, so I'd lost their numbers. One of the guys at the foster home asked me what I was Googling, and I told him, and he said the name sounded familiar. Hang on! Then he ran to the filing cabinet and pulled out a file with my sister's name on it. I couldn't believe it. My sister had given up her baby for adoption. And then I realized the baby I had watched turn into a cute 2-year-old, little Charlie, he was my nephew. No wonder I'd felt such a connection with him. I was shaking as I picked up the phone to call my sister. Would she hang up on me? When she answered and I heard her voice, I started sobbing. I told her it was me, and soon she was crying too. She asked what I was doing at the adoption agency, and I told her I worked there. Well, 1 hour later, she pulled up outside, and her and my dad came running towards me. They apologized for abandoning me, even though it was me who had left them. Then my sister started looking around, and she was wondering if her son was still there. When she saw him, she burst into tears and kept saying it was the second biggest mistake she'd ever made, giving her baby away. The first mistake being her fake relationship with Jeremy, which had ruined our sister bond. Now we're reunited, but I still work at the adoption agency. I love it there. As for Charlie, it's quite complicated, as my sister can't get him back after putting him up for adoption. But I can. So now I'm in the process of adopting my nephew, and then we can all be a happy family again. Oh, and we never heard from or spoke to Jeremy again. That's all in the past now.
Hi, my name's Natalie, and I'm obsessed with following the latest trends and buying new clothes. However, my mother and sister aren't like that at all. I want to be a fashion designer when I leave school, but my mom always scoffs and tells me that isn't a real profession. Well, she is a university lecturer and seems to hate it. So I don't want to do something I don't love. So here's a little background about me. My parents split up when I was 12. They had never got on really well. I think that my dad made a lot of effort with my mom, but she always seemed frustrated with him. She would snap at him for tiny things and would seem bored when he was telling her something. My dad didn't seem to mind that much, though. Maybe he was worried that if he left my mom, he wouldn't see me and my sister as much. Eventually, though, it must have gotten to be too much for him. After a week of whispered arguing and concealed crying, my dad announced that he was moving out. They assured us that we would still see loads of them both, and they definitely made that their number one priority. In fact, in some ways, things improved a lot after they split up. We spent half the week at my mom's, half the week at my dad's, and then alternated weekends. It actually meant we got to spend more quality time with each parent. Strangely, my dad seemed to have taken it much better than my mom. Even though I thought he was the one more invested in the relationship before, it seemed like a huge weight had been lifted off his chest now. He was more relaxed and laughed more. My mom, on the other hand, was more stressed than ever and snapped at us constantly. After about a year, my dad introduced me to Jessica, his new girlfriend. I was taken aback. I hadn't expected my dad to move on so fast. Obviously, I was happy for him, but I wasn't sure I would get on with his new woman. What if she was like stepmothers in films? Super controlling and trying to get rid of the kids. What if I never got to see my dad anymore? But as soon as I met Jessica, my worries faded away. She seemed very friendly and kind. While chatting, I told Jessica about my love of clothes and that I wanted to try and start making some of my own. I was surprised when she admitted to also being really into making her own clothes. And she showed me a picture of her in a beautiful dress that she had made. It was absolutely beautiful. I asked her if she would help me make a dress for my end-of-term party, and she said she would love to. I couldn't believe I had just met Jessica. It already felt like we had known each other for ages. My dad was clearly as thrilled as we were that we got on well. When I went to my mom's that night, my little sister had already told my mom about Jessica. My mom looked extremely grumpy and was very short with me when she asked what I thought about Dad's new girlfriend. The next weekend I was spending with my dad, but he told me when I arrived that he had to go away with work and asked if I would mind spending the weekend with Jessica. I said I didn't mind at all. Jessica seemed really excited to spend time with me, too. We spent Friday night watching movies and eating chocolate, and she plaited my hair really nicely. The next day, we decided to go shopping for supplies for my dress. But it really just turned into a huge shopping spree. She was even more fun to go shopping with than my friends because she had a really good eye for fashion. We spent Sunday working on my dress, and my weekend passed so fast because of how much fun I was having. I know it's awful, but I secretly wished that my mom could be a bit more like Jessica. Think how close we would be. When I got home to my mom's on Monday evening, she was too busy with work to talk to me until dinner time. She was actually acting really strangely, being really quiet and even more blunt than usual. It kind of seemed like she was depressed or something. I asked her if I could go to Dad's next weekend, saying that Jessica will help me with my homework. To my surprise, my mom burst into tears. I didn't know what to do. I had never seen my mom cry before. She started shouting at me, saying that it was fine if I preferred spending time with my dad's new girlfriend than her, that I could do what I wanted. I could see that it clearly wasn't fine, but I thought my mom was acting very childishly, and I wasn't about to argue with her in this mood, so I just left the room. The next weekend was amazing. We continued working on my dress, and I couldn't wait to try it on. Jessica was funny, but also really kind, and treated me like an adult. On Monday evening, back at my mom's, I braced myself for her to get angry again. But she was strangely calm, which was kind of worse because it made me very uneasy. She didn't ask me how my weekend was. Instead, she asked me if I wanted to go out dress shopping after school on Wednesday. She said she had seen a lovely dress that would really suit me. I knew I should have told her about the fact that I was making my dress, but I didn't have the heart to. On Wednesday, we went to see the dress, and as I expected, it was hideous. It had long sleeves and was a burgundy velvet. I would be the laughingstock of my class. I told her that I was kind of looking for something a bit more floaty and short, and she told me that she didn't think a dress like that would be appropriate for me. I hate how she always tries to control my life. I was so annoyed that I told her I was making a dress with Jessica. She didn't say anything to me for the rest of the evening, but the next day, she had told me that I was staying at her house for the weekend because I needed to catch up on my schoolwork and because Jessica was ill. I knew this wasn't true, but I knew I had no power to argue with her. The weekend before my party, just as I was packing for my dad's, my mom told me that he and Jessica had gone away for the weekend. I was devastated. What was I going to wear? The party was on the following Friday night. I cried and ran to my room. I just wanted to be alone. But 5 minutes later, my mom stormed into my room and started shouting at me. She said that I was acting like a complete brat, and I didn't even deserve to go to the party, never mind have a nice dress to wear to it. I couldn't believe what she was saying. I suddenly exploded and told her that I didn't want to live with her anymore, and that I'm sick of her acting so depressed all the time, and why can't she just get a life? All these feelings just came pouring out of me, and I couldn't stop them. I told her how unfair it was that she didn't even give me a choice about where I wanted to live when she and Dad separated. I turned to face her and said, I'd rather live with Dad because at least Jessica was nice to me and talked to me about stuff and actually wanted to hang out with me. I told her how bored I was living with a divorced mom and why couldn't she be a bit more cool like Jessica? My mom burst into tears when she heard all of this. She came over to my bed and tried to hug me. She was so sorry, and she'd sorted herself out and made it better. I was crying too, but I told her I was just sick of this life. It was making me so exhausted. My mom said she promised that she would change and she'd get some help for her depression. She asked for a second chance and explained that since Dad had met Jessica, she'd been jealous. And she'd been taking it out on me and my sister, and it wasn't fair. It was harder for us. She couldn't stop crying. It really seemed like she was serious about how jealous she'd been of Jessica. I just hoped things would get better. I couldn't bear this. And to top it all off, I wouldn't even get to go to the party now. The following Thursday night, I gave in to the fact that I wouldn't be going to the party the next day and got in my pajamas to watch a film. I felt so sad. Everyone was going except me. Just as I clicked play, there was a knock on my door. My mom came in holding a bag. I figured it was going to be the burgundy dress. There was no way I was going to wear that thing. But then my mom pulled the dress out, and it was my dress, the one Jessica and I had been working on. I couldn't believe it. It turned out that Jessica had actually been ill, and the following weekend, she and my dad had gone to get me a surprise for my outfit, a beautiful tiara that my grandma wore at her wedding. Then Jessica had finished my dress as a surprise, and the most shocking part was that my mom had helped her. They had worked on it together. I ran and hugged my mom, and I couldn't stop smiling. She hugged me back and said she would do anything for me, even if that meant cooperating with Jessica.